Hello, hello. Here today with another ranked game in Season 15 of the ranked season. Currently at rank 6 and 2 stars. Been rank 5 before prior to this, but unfortunately been pushed back down a little out of the Premier League. We're here today in the Hindenburg, a fairly standard uh, and fairly workhorse farming cruiser, in an attempt to farm our way to victory on this ranked battle. Now, the Hindenburg, of course, has seen some recent buffs, which has seen her have a bit of a resurgence in ranked play, or in competitive play, but all that aside, she still has her pros of penetrating 50mm of armor, 60mm if you take IFHE, but I don't think that build is particularly optimal outside of some very stringent scenarios such as competitive where you're expecting to see a lot of Kremlin and Yamato. So I'm opting for just a standard build, but even so, the standard build gives you 50mm of HE penetration on 12 fast-firing guns. In my case, I'm on a 9.8 second reload, since I am running a range module, which is a bit of a relic of my clan battles setup, but we'll see where that goes. Thus far for ranked, the range module has actually been working just fine, extending the range from 17.8-ish kilometers out to a very respectable 20.7. Anyhow, starting off, there's no carrier in this match, thankfully. In this arms race mode, in a game like this, where there's multiple heal buffs spawning, a carrier can be extremely problematic, especially to a fairly mediocre AA boat like the Hindenburg. But in this case, no carrier, no problem. Single DD, so it would be nice to protect him. However, I'm going to head off with this Smolensk onto this flank. He is going to smoke up and farm stuff. I'm going to farm stuff well. Being completely open water, I am, however, very comfortably in the Hindenburg, a very tanky cruiser, especially if you angle. Opening up on the Puerto Rico. Do note, however, there's a Republic who doesn't care about my 30mm strip armor. Repub is, of course, the original anti-Hindenburg battleship. Nice opening salvo for 6 HE penetrations for about 5k on that Puerto Rico. He's still fairly broadside, relatively speaking, so I am going to see if I can get some AP onto him. Hindenburg AP is, of course, extremely fearsome, but does not have anything like improved bounce angles, just has that high alpha as the only thing really going for it. I do score a really weird citadel on that Puerto Rico at maximum range. I'm not even sure if I should have the actual penetration power to do that, but apparently I do, so I'll take it. So we chunked him for... we were sitting at 5k before, like 13,000. So kind of showing off the devastating Hindenburg AP power when you can put it to use. However, thanks to its standard bounce angles, you typically just use HE for most of the match. The Hindenburg is in fact quite adept at farming witherers and arsonists. Now the two enemies here are likely to have angled in, I had thought, but turns out if I had kept AP loaded I would have gotten a nice early blast off. Small spotting me, does set me on fire with his opening blast, but I'm going to disengage myself, kind of aiming at the last known. I'm gonna wait till that Hindenburg hard spots me for me to unleash my barrage. Now that Hindenburg is also fairly broadside, so adjust my fire onto him. Now Hindenburg has a turtleback, so I'm unlikely to get citadels onto him, since my name is not Des Moines or Puerto Rico. I don't have improved bounce angles, and I don't have the huge Puerto Rico guns with which to get that heavy AP fire. Oof. From range you can see me take a pretty large salvo from that Montana. I'm gonna switch onto the PR as I duck behind this mountain and pop my first heal. The Hindenburg also has the luxury of having an extra heal charge. Now if someone can put eyes onto that Puerto Rico, who is probably right there still, should be able to put some damage out onto him. I thought he would beach, but turns out he's gonna slide right past. So at this point, don't need to use my spotter plane yet, but I am aiming for my minimap, staying from behind cover here. Hindenburg is a fairly sluggish cruiser. Looks like my shells are a bit under lead, gonna adjust forward. I am firing at 18 kilometers, you'll note. Need to watch my distance. My butt is sticking out and the Montana is close to the edge of my firing range. Puerto Rico's actually killing himself. Spotted now. Time to move forward. I am pretty much broadsiding. Maintaining fire on the Puerto Rico, but he's angling. Slide forward just to avoid Montana shells. Looks like he switched to HE or something. 6 ricochets on the angled Puerto Rico hull. I did mention those unimproved bounce angles. And someone else finishes him off. Now that Montana looks to be pushing, I'm already on the border. And apparently, I'm the furthest one out other than this Montana. So I'm gonna have to assist my Montana here. He's pushing into 2 fire spamming cruisers and an enemy Montana, so not exactly something you want to do. Looks like the Smolensk might turn in slightly, so I switched to AP instinctively. As a response, my first HE salvo skims him. Gonna wait and see. Now Montana has 406s, so even though he took that 20k chunk out of me just now, as long as I stay angled, should be fairly safe. Montana's fleeing, so it's time for me to re-engage myself into the battle. On the way though, we will harass that Montana. Gonna keep him from firing, or if he fires, I'm just gonna shoot at him. You have to take care. If the Montana decides to shoot at me while I'm in this turn, I'm gonna be quite vulnerable. So the Hindenburg has a huge 30mm strip running down her midsection and upper midsection, which allows her to bounce 406s, such as those found on the Montana. We're up a ship now, note, so I can play quite patiently, but I do want to turn around and engage. Buff-wise, we're sitting on 2 heals, a cooldown, and a maneuverability buff, so you'll note that's why my HP is slowly ticking back up. Montana finally decides that he wants to open up, and in case things go south, we do need to farm for our star, so even at max range, we are going to open up, and with range module, this is not so difficult. You can see here the Hindenburg has fairly reasonable ballistics. Now in order to fire all 4 of my guns, I have to push towards the border. I don't want to do that, so I'm going to actually angle back in, take 2 of my guns offline, but it's more important that I position properly than I can maintain my farming. Get a fire. And as I mentioned, we do lose a ship back, so I don't want to be hovering on the border being completely worthless, like so. Montana comes back up. I did set a fire, which he appears to have damage controlled quite recently, so time to push in. Smolensk, in the meantime, is smoking, so he's gonna push me away. But I am gonna try and get my fire back first. My turrets are turned around, and the Smolensk smoke is in fact disengaging me from his Montana. I don't have any bloom. My smoke fire is pretty bad, but not that bad. 10 kilometers. So we'll know that we're within 10 kilometers once we get spotted again. At this point, I'm pushing the Smolensk with my Montana. Unable to relight that fire on the Montana, sadly. Gonna push the corner, turning my turrets once more. Hindenburg's fleeing while pushing straight away. And my team controls the center. We did trade back for that gearing, you might have seen. Going to very comfortably push towards Smolensk. Now he has 8-kilometer torpedoes, but I have Hindenburg's 6-kilometer German hydro. Do note that I'm running an improved captain, so I have a pretty absurd 5.4-kilometer torpedo detection. We're about 10 kilometers out from the Smolensk smoke now, so if he stayed where he was, we would be spotted when we fire, so we do have to keep that in mind. Repub's close to the edge of my range. Kind of don't want to give things away. We saw some tracer fire there. He's still close. Gonna risk firing. Looks like he's not inside that smoke. He's moved on somewhere. Otherwise I would have been detected from my gun bloom. Did fire a nice AP salvo off onto the side of the Montana, 5 overpens and 1 penetration. Spotted now. But remember, I have 12.6 detection, he has about 10 kilometer detection, and he is in fact over there. Now he does actually vastly out DPM me, especially when he's angled like that, so I can't use my AP, although any kind of under angling from him does result in me getting a fairly large salvo like that. Now chasing is always bad. Switching speculatively into AP because he appears to be making a full turn. I did fire an HE salvo, so he might think to risk it. And you can see any amount of AP pens does inflict large amounts of damage. He pops his Kuznetsov over there. He's under angling again, however, which puts him in danger. I would not recommend slowing to a stop like that. He's slightly angled, so I might have pretty poor results shooting there. Just gonna blind fire that position. He's fairly low, his Kuznetsov kind of keeping him out of trouble for a little bit. He gets blind fired to death. And I'm actually using his smoke against him on that Montana. I know the Montana's beached against his corpse, so even though I cannot see, thanks to the way the game renders visuals, I can re-angle in and kind of try to get some pot shots onto that Montana even without vision. Re-angling, of course, the moment that the smoke dissipates. Oh, maybe he reversed. Fairly disappointing game in terms of my performance, but just a very standard Hindenburg game. Now I'm playing very, very safely, you'll notice, from the back line of the team. So as a result, if this game went south, well, it wouldn't have gone so well. Would have had to farm a lot more. But the Hindenburg is a fairly safe cruiser to play in the 6 to 12 bracket, in my opinion. Once I get back to rank 5, I'm probably going to switch over to a battleship because I think battleships are absolutely broken in this mode. But because I am more of a cruiser player, my preference is to play cruisers when possible. And so even if it's not the optimal pick, I think that inside of this rank bracket of 6 to 12, where people make plenty of mistakes and you can just kind of do your own thing and just not dying is usually good enough, I'm going to continue to stick with the Hindenburg whenever I get kicked down to this bracket and try and push my 1 to 5 with the Yamato, which is my choice of battleship. I think the other two picks I would make are the Burgoyne and the Thunderer. But since I am currently working on my Yamato Legendary module anyway, and Yamato is a fairly decent pick, I'm perfectly happy with that. Loading up into this match, again we're in the Hindenburg, and this is a very cruiser-heavy match, surprisingly. So enemy team has a Repub, which is annoying as their only battleship. He punches right through my 30mm armor. And Worcester, Henry, Smolensk, so 3 heavy HE threats and 3 torpedo threats. Well, 2 torpedo threats, and I don't know why you would bring a Grozovoy. I think Grozovoy's a pretty terrible pick, because torpedo destroyers are much, much more powerful here, rather than farming gunboat destroyers. If you're going to farm with guns, you've got to go all the way and pick clever. But that aside, at least I have my powerful German Hydro to keep me safe. Now, spotter plane plus range module might seem a little excessive, but range module is really just for those moments where you need to alter your angle. Now in this kind of matchmaking, with no carrier again, but lots of fire spam, I am going to have to play fairly safe. Need to make sure my guns are hot and firing almost the entirety of the match in this kind of situation, because it is going to be a DPM race. The enemy team does technically out DPM us. They have a Henry and Venezia kind of similar DPM, Smolensk and Smolensk kind of similar DPM, but the Worcester vastly out damages me so long as he can keep his guns hot. Now I do have a huge range advantage at 20 kilometers, and I do have the advantage of, well, not having those floaty Worcester arcs. So there is that, but any kind of pushing in is going to be disadvantageous, and my destroyers are going to be under a lot more radar threat. Republic pops up. Now remember, he does pen me, so kind of all over in spite of my 30mm armor. Get spotted pretty early, so I'm going to make a very dangerous turn. Remember, I have a turtleback, but it's not that extensive. Worcester making a turn. I'm going to speculatively switch to AP, see if he turns out. Minimap tells me he is turning out, even without looking at him. so I can see if I can punch some of my powerful Hindenburg AP into his side. Now there was a daring spotted briefly as well. Scoring a double citadel there. Nicely done. But at this point switching back to HE. Remember what I said about keeping the gun barrels hot? Gonna stay on the repub. Oh, Worcester's over there. Switch back to AP. He's angled away, but just ever so slightly at this moment. He re-angles, which means I'm gonna look for a better target. Doesn't matter what it is. Smolensk also angled, so empty the AP into the superstructure of the repub. I cannot pen his armor with AP at that angle. He's very bow into me, but I can rake this superstructure here, so that's what I'm going for. Sadly, don't manage to get the right area of armor, so as a result you can see lots of ricochets. Looks like the repub's looking at me. Worcester's definitely looking my way. Try and set a fire. Now, Hindenburg HE is very pathetic, but having 12 barrels and a fairly short reload does make up for that somewhat. Just keep the gun barrels hot, kite away from the repub. The Worcester is exchanging fire with me. Oh, repub decides to shoot at me. But remember, as I mentioned at the beginning of the match, I have a huge range advantage and a huge ballistics advantage. Repub easily slicing through my armor like hot butter with his 431s. He's reversing at this point. Don't know what's up with that. But we are going to incinerate him. Even though he overmatches my armor, I need to find the right lead. Note. Fairly confident going around into a full turn. Find the range, and we are going to crisp this guy. In this kind of matchmaking with this many cruisers, the Republic is very vulnerable. Very fast mobile battleship, so you don't want to actually be bowing in the way he is. You want to kind of stay on the move and disengage by just turning away if necessary, but he appears to have adopted a pretend Kremlin / Yamato mentality, which is going to result in him getting crisped to death. You can see he's already at half. So even though there are repair buffs in this mode, and he's probably ticked some heals, he's gonna burn. My daring goes down in the meantime, but we're just gonna keep at the repub. Need to make sure you can try and equalize kills. And I currently don't have access to anything else to effectively shoot. That Worcester is fairly low. I could shoot that Smolensk, but I want to keep pressure onto this repub. He's trying to disengage himself. We don't want to allow that. If I can crisp him from a safe distance, like so, it's perfectly fine by me. But you can see the HE DPM by itself is fairly bad. At this point, going to bob high. My spotter. So we have a minute and 20 on our spotter uptime. You can see my accuracy is somewhat negatively affected, but at the same time, I'm extending my range, and I'm getting a better perspective. Ducked behind that rock there, very briefly. Now I am vulnerable to the repub, but even though I'm still in range technically, he probably didn't have the perspective to hit me. I'm trying to relight a fire. Just staying on him with my guns. The fire is more important for keeping him lit than anything else. He's adjusting his rudder slightly, which is throwing off my aim, especially at this extreme range. At this point, it's time to push up. There's my fire, but he does get smoked up and disengaged by that Smolensk beside him. He's gonna crisp a little bit though. Oh, no, he damage control. I'm wrong there, but so that means I have to push. We did lose a ship in the center, as I mentioned, while we were crisping our repub buddy. If that repub wants to keep firing, however, he's going to have to reveal himself soon enough. So, fairly confident I can just push in, and we will re-spot. Worcester hasn't been spotted for a while. He's probably over here, to be honest. Spotted by the daring somewhere. Oh, actually, I'm spotted by the Worcester. Switching to AP, but sadly this rock is going to occlude me, so I'm not going to be able to fire for a little bit. You can see that HE very consistent, even though the damage is fairly low. I'm going to be broadside. He's going to be broadside to me when I exit. Well, missed most of my window, but my front guns did clear. Didn't quite get the right angle. Venezia is engaging him, switching to high explosive obviously because he's angled. Did get a nice chunk because he aborted his angling. Didn't quite account for the turning of the Worcester in time. He's gonna out DPM me at this point, but I have plenty of heals to burn through, Daring also engaging me. And I trust that between myself and my team, I should be able to engage him quite nicely. As I mentioned a little bit last game, the Hindenburg has plenty of heals, so fairly effective at this kind of endurance gameplay. I'm just gonna endure the pounding he's gonna put on to me, running past some torpedoes, to be finally trade a kill back, thankfully. Engaging the Smolensk. Smolensk doing 36 knots, I declined to put out the fire because, well, there's no need. Venezia also very effective against the smoke, if you can land those shells. Plenty of destroyer spotting in this game. I'm gonna switch over to the Daring. Daring a fairly slow destroyer. To get one nice HE hit, need to watch my position, but I have a rock between me and the repub, and honestly I want to get out there and smoke him. Or blast him, I guess. I'm gonna blind fire this guy one more time, and then after that, I am going to push out and re-engage the repub. The repub's one of the things I can pressure, so moving forward. His relative angle's pretty good. It would be nice to get a fire first, but with this much broadside, there's no reason not to use the AP. Does a lot more damage. You can see the HE is very pathetic when it's unable to penetrate. The repub wants to keep firing, which means he's going to stay lit, which means I am going to punch holes into him. Nice 5k opener with only 2 full pens from the 4 shells that contacted. With the heal bus ticking, you can see that small amount of fire damage I took was easily healed back. 7k out of him. He's turning away now. Oh no, he straightens out. So I can just correct my aim, I think, and still stick with the AP. Want to stick with the AP for as long as possible. Okay, that's definitely too angled. Switch to HE. You can see the ricochets and shatters start immediately. Circle in to chase, just like with the Worcester. Repub disengaging, but I'm gonna stay on him. Leave the Daring to the other guys for now. Eventually, once this repub's out, I can push very aggressively with my Hydro. I still have 4 heal charges. And remember this, essentially for all cruisers, once a battleship threat is gone, you don't have to worry so much about angling anymore unless there's ships like Stalingrad or other semi-battleship monsters out there. So, eliminating the repub is the easiest way in a ranked battle, not in all cases, but in a ranked battle. Eliminating the battleships or hiding yourself from them is the most effective way to kind of open yourself up to your aggressive maneuvers. Sticking with the HE, he did repair my fire. At this point, I need to turn out away from the border. Just like with the last game, I'm taking guns offline, but it's more important to get back into the proper directionality of the fight. Turning to push toward that Daring's position, Venezia does kill the Grozavoy with a torpedo, which is embarrassing for the Grozavoy to say the least. Oh no, that's a Sommers. Okay, that's less embarrassing, but still. Catching torpedoes in general is not great. Using HE on this Smolensk, which is angled away from me. Again, the AP is pretty pathetic, but Venezia's sap, on the other hand, is working quite well. Henry 4 on the other side should have been doing what I was doing, essentially. It looks like he has been cooking my Yamato, but not quite enough to turn the game. Daring briefly spotted. I'm just pushing the cap at this point. Not afraid whatsoever. I have 2 destroyers screening me, so I haven't even had to pop my Hydro a single time this game. Hindenburg's just a very standard DPM cruiser. She brings a good amount of utility with the Hydro, has very good range, good overall damage. Comparing her to a package such as the Zhao, she is much less stealthy and doesn't have the long-range torpedo utility, but she does bring consistent gun power with more penetration power against armored battleships such as GK, or even say a Montana's 38mm middle deck, since she has 50mm of base penetration with her stock guns. A somewhat superior range, 17.5 is the legendary module Zhao's range, whereas mine starts at 17.8 and then can be extended out to 20.7, as you can see here. Very potent AP. The Zhao AP is probably actually better than Hindenburg's overall. It has much higher velocity and better energy retention over range, and more usability because the Zhao can ambush with its 9.9 concealment. However, the Hindenburg just has a much higher rate of fire, so when you do catch an exposed broadside of a battleship, for example, rather than a cruiser that you're ambushing in the Zhao, you can output more damage over time, since the Zhao has a much longer base reload of 13 seconds. The Zhao does have improved accuracy, but of course you have the same barrel count. Slightly less awkward angles. Zhao does pretty poor angles. Hindenburg has not that great angles either, but they are better. And quite a bit more durability. The Hindenburg and Zhao both have fairly durable cruiser armor schemes, but the Hindenburg has 10,000 extra health, as well as an additional heal, and German Hydro. And Henry IV fleeing the battlefield. Now the Henry IV is also a farming cruiser that can also have access to 50mm of HE penetration if he takes IFHE, although with the coming 0.92 changes, I'm not sure if that's going to be the recommended spec anymore. Probably not, I would imagine, since halving your excellent Henry IV fire chance seems a huge waste. But that aside, I think the Henry IV is vastly inferior because it just doesn't have the same pushing capabilities as the Hindenburg. No German Hydro, and though she has similar armor scheme with the 30mm midsection and spaced armor to boot, she just has a much squishier nose. He looks fairly flat, you can see, on my screen, but he's actually fairly angled if you look at the minimap. So if I shoot this AP as I've loaded, it is going to bounce. So in this kind of situation where you loaded AP to try and get a broadside, but they angle, just aim for the superstructure like so, and you can get a huge punishing salvo of 6k into his superstructure there, and HE to make sure he just dies. And that'll wrap up our second Hindenburg game and push us back into the Premier League rank 1 to 5 bracket. Easy does it. Hindenburg is a very simple cruiser to play, so if you're looking for something to kind of climb toward the Premier League, Hindenburg's a fine pick if you're familiar with cruisers. Very forgiving with all the heals, as you can see. No reward because I've been to rank 5 before, but this time quite a bit more damage. Farmed my high cowl, farmed some money. Again, not the highest if we had lost, but good enough to get the job done as long as you win. That's what you're looking for in ranked. Anyhow, before we go, I'm running a bit of a weird Hindenburg spec. So just keep in mind you may want to make some alterations depending on what you want, but module-wise, I'm running this setup. Now, there are some carriers in the queue, so if you find that you're facing a lot of carriers, I would recommend slotting a fighter. The Hindenburg fighter's like not great, but not terrible. However, even though you can take Def AA, the Hindenburg's base AA is kind of bad, and the German Hydro is kind of hard to give up, so I'd still recommend running Hydro irregardless of carriers. Module-wise, very straightforward. Main armaments, Hydro mod if you have one. If not, I would probably recommend engine room. Although the Hindenburg doesn't lose engine nearly as much as say the Hipper or Rune that come before her. It can happen, especially if you eat a long-range citadel. Damage control is nice, but Hindenburg as a cruiser is fairly resistant to fire. In slot 3, I'm actually running turret traverse right now. If you don't want turret traverse, aiming systems is always fine. AA module used to be fairly standard, and secondary battery would be pretty funny, but I don't recommend either AA or secondary battery. Again, the Hindenburg's AA is kind of poor, and then secondaries are a meme. So it's between turret traverse and accuracy, so pick what you want. I like traverse because, as you saw, there are scenarios where you kind of need to turn your ship and take turrets offline, so I want to reduce the amount of time I'm offline. Hindenburg's not a start-stop cruiser, and as a cruiser you don't have that long fire time or flood time, so damage control system is out. And since you're not a start-stop cruiser and you kind of stay on the move, steering gears is where you want to be at. The steering rudder shift on the Hindenburg base is something like 12 seconds by itself, so dropping it down to sub 10 seconds is definitely ideal. And then slot 5 actually has some flexibility. Consumables looks tempting, but 10% even on an extended hydro still only amounts to what, like 24 seconds? 14 seconds, looks like. So not something I can recommend. Instead, concealment is a very safe standard option. You don't need torpedo lookout system, you have hydroacoustic search. However, if you want to play Hindenburg a little more open water, steering gears is actually pretty fine. I've tried it before and it's honestly not the worst in the world. And of course, if you have legendary module, it does go in the slot. I think Hindenburg legendary is completely unnecessary even in the world of Smolensk fires though, because proper damage control use should allow you to manage your damage over time effects quite effectively. And last but not least, I am running range. This is of course because I had a clan battle spec Hindenburg. Before that I was running reload. I think either module is fine. For ranked, I'm actually liking the range module. It does offer you a little more flexibility and you don't really miss the extra firepower too much, but for randoms I would recommend running main battery mod along with a spotter plane. Captain Rise, I'm running Franz von Jutland. This is a fairly unique Hindenburg build. I'm kind of trying to take advantage of all of Franz's skills, so that's why I'm running Vigilance. You can see here it gives an extra 35% torpedo acquisition range, and this combined with Hydro means that you get a 5.4 kilometer torpedo spot on your Hydro, which is kind of nifty. Compare this though to the regular Hydro. So if we look at the Z over here, standard detection for German Hydro would be 4 kilometers. So you get an extra 1.4 kilometer warning range. And while that is pretty nice for you, it's actually more important for your allies. It gives any utility you want to have with your allied Hydro spotting bubble. It gets a lot more effective when you have this spec in particular. But anyhow, the standard 10-point build would be priority target, into adrenaline rush, into superintendent, into concealment expert, and from there the build's pretty flexible. I would recommend expert loader as well. You do switch ammunition a lot, but that's just an 11-point build. And then I guess to top off at 14, demolition expert is actually pretty good on Hindenburg, especially if you're not running IFHE like so. Hindenburg turret reverse is pretty good by itself, and you can take that module now, so I don't think expert marksman is that necessary, which frees up the 2 points for the jack of all trades, which is improved on Franz von Jutland. And then this build leaves me with 3 spare points, which I opt to take Vigilance with. Now if you're not running Jutland, if you're running a standard captain, so this is an IFHE captain that I have for clan battles. This spec will soon be outdated though, because with the coming patch, IFHE will soon be kind of bad. But this is a fairly standard Hindenburg build as well, so just take off the 4 points. So you're taking fire prevention. Just to lower the amount of fire that you take from sustained HE spamming, because the Hindenburg is capable of pushing, and reducing the fire zones is actually helpful. So unlike basics of survivability, which is not too effective because it's reducing actual fire time, this is reducing fire chance and fire zones, which is much more useful. And the Hindenburg is a very large cruiser, so it's very easy for both midsections to get set on fire. So we're not taking IFHE with this build, but otherwise we're taking everything in this build. So we have 4 spare points after spending everything except IFHE here. Priority here, by the way, is PT, into AR, into SI, into CE, into probably expert loader first, and then fire prevention. Now we have 4 spare points. So we're not taking vigilance because we don't have the super vigilance. So what do we want to do? We could do expert marksman plus jack of all trades. That's a pretty standard one. That's pretty much a Des Moines build or an Alaska build / Montana build, and we don't want basics. So probably the easiest would be to just go into demolition expert plus preventative maintenance for a non-Franz von Jutland build. But I am personally, as I mentioned, of course, running Jutland. This was a clan battle spec for the very specific purpose of being able to damage Kremlin very consistently. Anyhow, that was the Hindenburg in the 6 to 10 bracket, or 6 to 12 bracket, back to rank 5 now. So going to switch over to the Yamato. Battleships are very busted in this mode, but we'll get to that when we get to that. Anyhow, I hope you enjoyed these brief Hindenburg games. Just some very standard cruiser gameplay, showcasing, well, safe play and just making use of armor. There is, of course, the 30mm armor midsection, which covers an extensive part of the Hindenburg and allows her to be fairly tanky against non-431, non-457 battleships. With that said, that'll be all for now, and I will catch you all later. Cheers.